Hey there, lovely people, and welcome to Kaiti Draws. On this channel, I am going to be drawing goddesses and heroines from all across the globe, and at the same time, we are going to learn about them. If this is something that you're interested in and you want more of, the best way to support me is to like and to subscribe. It really means a lot to me. So this is actually my first video. And I wanted to, of course, go big or go home. So I decided to try to conquer the world's most complicated pantheon, and that is Egyptian. So today we are actually going to explore the Egyptian Nubian goddess Anuket. The gods in Egyptian lore are complex. Keep in mind, many of these deities emerged sometime in prehistory, and even further as a part of the Nubian pantheon. Unfortunately, we can't pinpoint exactly when Anuket was created, but I would surmise Anuket is easily over 5,000 years old. So, something to note, we today are closer in years, in age, to Cleopatra alive than Cleopatra was to the origin of the building of the pyramids. So, that's a lot. Cleopatra was known to be the last of the true pharaohs of Egypt. It's pretty amazing. Sorry, y'all, this may be a bit of an info dump, but it has to happen. Normally, we will not go into depth with geography and history, but you kind of understand why we have to, right? That's at least 3,000 years of ancient Egyptian history. So it's a long-standing civilization with a fascinating culture. I'm not an Egyptologist, but here's what I found in my research thus far. The cool and partially confusing thing about Egyptian gods is that they represent social and natural phenomenons. Ancient Egypt was one of the largest civilizations in the Mediterranean world for nearly 3,000 years. That's a long time for a god to stay the same. They evolve with time, geography, and may oversee parts of a big picture. To put this plainly, the gods don't exclusively rule over one area for the entirety of their existence. Such as the gods Ra, Atum, Horus, and more acted as sun gods. There was no one sun god. Today we might think so because of how Western culture likes to portray things, but at the time it changed so much. Sometimes it would honestly change depending on who was the pharaoh at the time. In addition, there were different quote-unquote tribes throughout Egypt that had their own pantheons before it became a massive kingdom. Another unique thing about Egyptian deities is that they typically reflect the area they originated from. We have Upper and Lower Egypt with all their unique landscapes and primary pantheons. I just want to note that when you talk about Upper Egypt in cardinal directions, that actually means south. And that's because the flow of the Nile actually runs south to north. So it might be a little confusing when we talk about Lower Egypt being north and Upper Egypt being south, because intuitively it feels the opposite. What a lot of us know about Egyptian myth is what comes from Greco-Roman period. If you want more Egyptian history, check out the links in the description below. There's plenty of places to get started. So how does this apply to Miss Anuket? We can see her personification change over time as the Egyptians intended. Originally, Anuket was a Nubian deity, but quickly became a part of the Egyptian pantheon. This is especially true in southern Egypt in the lower cataracts. Cataracts are white water rapids. They're shallow parts of the river, and there are notably 6 in the Nile. She was usually depicted as a gorgeous woman wearing a crown of reeds and ostrich feathers. Sometimes you can find her holding a scepter topped with an ankh. Often, she was accompanied by a gazelle. Sometimes she was a gazelle. We will go into that more in a moment. As I draw, I will be sticking with more common human and earlier forms. No gazelle heads, none of that stuff. But it is really important to include Anuket's headdress of tall ostrich feathers. She was widely worshipped in Nubia, and she was actually given the title Mistress of Nubia. In ancient times, in lands south of Egypt, this is an African headdress. This is typically worn by a chief. The cylindrical crown at the base is called a modius. It is typically for male and female goddesses in Upper Egyptian culture. Her form combines both cultures simultaneously. For the Egyptians, Anuket is the patron goddess of the Nile as, quote, nourisher of the fields. She was most associated with the lower cataracts, and this is near the place of Aswan. Specifically, she was associated with Upper Egypt and was goddess of everything south of the Egyptian border. Since we have a map here, let's look at it again. We have Elephantine. It's an island in the River Nile bordering northern Nubia. In the New Kingdom at Elephantine, Anuket formed part of a triad that included the ram-headed god of Khnum and the goddess Cetis, who we will talk about next time. These 3 water deities were worshipped here because they protected the Nile cataracts, especially near the first cataract, and the islands in the Aswan area. And this is the super cool part, and I'm not entirely sure if this is 100% true. I read this in one of the articles. This is the area that the Egyptians believed was the source of the Nile, because the Nile flowed from south to north, where it flowed up from the underworld and into the land of Egypt. I really like this story. I'm not sure if it's 100% true. I kind of hope it is, though. Anuket oversaw the fertility of the lands near the river. Anuket actually means embrace, and may have originally referred to the embrace of the waters of the flood. It's actually kind of cute because you can see how the 2 tributaries of the Nile also stretched out like 2 arms. Here's the map again, so you can actually see it. It's like one big hug. So it's I just really like it. I thought that was clever. She was worshipped as the great nourisher of the farms and fields because of the annual flood of the Nile, and that deposited the heavy layer of black silt from Upper Egypt and Nubia. This was used to fertilize the crops that nourished the whole civilization. This annual flood was so important that the Egyptians based their lives around it. When the flood began, there was a festival of Anuket. People would throw precious gifts into the water to say thanks. So why this gazelle? The water goddess's link to the gazelle was most likely because the Egyptians saw these animals always around the water. She was also associated as a goddess of the hunt, and was probably thought to be agile like a gazelle. She provides life with the Nile and becomes a protective deity during childbirth. Anuket becomes associated with fertility because of her natural personification of giving life. Her name, because it means embracing, transformed into a more sexual sense. In the New Kingdom, she becomes a goddess of lust. She became associated with the cowrie, especially the shell, which, well, it resembled lady bits. Other notes about Anuket to keep in mind is she was originally the daughter of Ra, a deity of the sun, but is most strongly associated with the goddess Cetus since prehistory. This is where things get a little bit tricky. Their relationship isn't entirely clear. Cetus and Anuket could be sisters. Cetus and Khnum Ra might be Anuket's parents because Cetus and Khnum Ra were definitely together. Anuket might have been a junior consort. Who knows? Maybe it's a bit of column A and column B, and this may have changed over time. At any rate, the two goddesses, they're basically two peas in a pod. Anuket just happens to be not as popular or not as well known. Cetus, on the other hand, is a little more known. She's still a little bit of an obscure goddess. However, both goddesses were connected with Isis, and everybody knows Isis, taking on the attributes of fertile waters as well as being a form of the star of Sirius. So we'll talk about this a little more later. My personal hot take, Anuket is not considered a major goddess in the Egyptian pantheon, but she isn't necessarily a minor goddess. She is an old goddess and probably gained a cult following in the pre-dynastic period. Her physical features strongly resemble Nubian influences, and as we see two cultures merge together in southern Egypt, we see Anuket morphing over time. I have a strong feeling that she was a major goddess at one point because, I mean, she had so much power over the Nile. The Nile was very important, so I can see it being her being a very vital goddess. But as Egyptian civilization rose, her influence waned. But these are just my thoughts. That's not necessarily accurate. Maybe we'll never know. And here we have Anuket in all of her glory. I hope this video inspired you to go look up all of Anuket's lore and mythology and explore some Egyptian mythology as well. It's super fascinating, very complex. There's a lot of history. So it's kind of a lot, but hopefully the citations down below will be some sort of a help to you. Stay tuned for next week, where we will be exploring her counterpart, the warrior goddess Cetus. If you've made it to the end, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, the best way to support me is by liking and subscribing. Also, commenting. I want to know how I'm doing, what I could do better. So I would love to hear from you guys. If you guys also love my art and you want to see more of it, you guys can check out my Instagram and my TikTok at Kaiti Draws. You can also check out my website at kaitidraws.com. I'm going to be doing a lot of cool stuff on that end as well. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.